I will fight till the end. Doesn't matter what the world brings against.
Hello, everyone. My name is Martha Boneta, and it is my honor to be your host for Senator Amanda Chase's Cut to the Chase on WNTW AM 820, where we talk about what matters to Virginians most all across the Commonwealth. I love Virginia with all my heart. It's the birthplace of America. And with that said, we are going to have an amazing show today. We are having some incredible guests. First up is Delegate Randy Minchew. Randy Minchew is the delegate in the 10th House of Delegates District for more than 20 years. Randy Minchew is recognized as one of the most effective legislators in the Commonwealth of Virginia General Assembly, consistently gaining high marks from the nonpartisan Virginia Foundation for Research and Economic Education, Virginia Free, and from the Northern Virginia Chamber Partnership, an advocacy consortium comprised of our region's local chambers of commerce. In addition to being such a wonderful legislature, caring about Virginians in every corner of the Commonwealth, Randy Minchew is also an avid outdoorsman and conservationist. With that said, we are going to wait for Delegate Minchew to call in. I understand that he is coming out of a session right now, a committee meeting, and he will be joining us shortly. With that said, our next guest, I'm very excited to have on board. We are so fortunate, so blessed to have my friend Charles Green, who is the Deputy Commissioner with the Virginia Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services, also known as VDACS. In this role, he is responsible for the day-to-day operations of VDACS, which is one of Virginia's oldest agencies that was established in 1877. Agriculture is Virginia's number one industry. It produces over 400,000 jobs and creates over $60 billion into our economy. And I feel very blessed to be a part of the agricultural community. And ladies and gentlemen, Delegate Randy Minchew has just called in. And to give you a little bit of information about Delegate Randy Minchew, he is recognized as one of the most effective legislators in the Virginia General Assembly. He consistently receives high marks from various organizations all across the Commonwealth. He is our delegate in the Virginia 10th House of Delegates, and he is my friend, a great defender of liberty and freedom throughout the Commonwealth of Virginia. Welcome, Delegate Randy Minchew.
Well, thank you, Martha. Can you hear me very well?
We can hear you perfectly. Thank you so much for joining us. I have received
great to be with you.
Countless texts and email messages. Everybody cannot wait to hear about your drone bill.
Yeah, that was a bill that came to me from a couple of different sources, Martha. First of all, I love technology. Technology is fine, but what we're seeing is a growing degree of drones, also called by some aerial electrical devices, interfering with personal and property rights. You may have heard that in your home county of Fauquier, noted movie star from Apocalypse Now, Robert Duvall,
Yes.
Had a drone that was a couple of paparazzi guys decided they would fly from the state road over another farmer's property to see what was going on behind a stockade fence. And as you probably know, Martha, one of his neighbors decided to liberate that drone from the sky with,
Yes.
With her shotgun, proving what a good shot she was.
Yes, absolutely.
But also we've had in other places what I would call domestic spying or peeping by drone.
Absolutely.
And so what my bill did, is focus in on that rather tightly enforced area of where someone is using a drone for the purpose of a furtive spying or peeping. We have a peeping statute on the book. It's been there since the 1920s. We all know what it is.
Right.
And but in many urban environments, we've seen some people suggesting that drones can be used for that purpose. So what my bill does, it makes peeping by drone a Class 1 misdemeanor. It
Yes.
passed the House by a very large margin, and now is over in the Senate. And hopefully the Senate Courts of Justice Committee will treat it favorably.
Well, yes, and my understanding is that it passed out of the House unanimously, or not, 97 yay.
Yeah, exactly.
Zero
We were
nay.
down, 3 delegates. They were either out of town or we had one vacancy. I'm still going to call that, Martha, to be a unanimous vote in the House.
It sounds like it to me, and I just want to thank you. You're a great defender of property rights and privacy as well, because as modern technology changes, now we have to worry about drones and violating people's privacy. So folks are real excited about your drones bill, and I understand that you have another bill as well having to deal with agriculture.
Yes, it's a bill that is also in the category of economic liberty, energy liberty for farmers, and it basically is a bill that expands the concept of agricultural net metering. If you're a farmer, you're a rural business operative, you're under current law, you can establish a solar array, or it could even be biogas, it could be wind, could even be geothermal, to create electrical energy on your property and put it back into the grid. The concept of net metering, Martha, as you know, is where you have a meter that goes both ways. So it measures the power coming into your farm and the power going out. So if you produce 3 kilowatts of, say, solar energy, and you put that back in the grid, and you absorb and use around your house and farm 5 kilowatts, you're only going to pay for 2 because you net out the power that you put back in the grid. And the great deal about that is with net metering, you get a dollar for dollar credit. So the power you produce gives you a dollar for dollar credit against the power you consume. And with the price of solar going down, and from solar arrays and the like, also with battery technology becoming better, we may well see in the future, Martha, where just like our grandmothers would grow tomatoes and store those in small mason jars.
Absolutely.
And eat the tomatoes when there's snow on the ground. Imagine if you do that with the energy you collect from your farm in the summertime, and you can burn it and use it to keep your house warm or to run your computer or refrigerator in the wintertime.
Well, I'll tell you, in being in a rural area, when the power goes out, that could really come in handy as well.
You're absolutely right, Martha. And from what I'm hearing from people who are much more technologically skilled than me, is that we will see in the next 5 to 10 years a quantum breakthrough in battery technology. Part of which is being done by Elon Musk and his battery laboratory out of Nevada. And we may well see a brand new battery technology that will be good for cars, electrical cars, or storing power in your house. And to me, I like that because, as you know, Martha, 2 of the greatest of all American virtues are self-reliance and individual determination. And if you're a farmer, as you are, that sense of liberty, that I'm going to make up my decisions, I'm going to be self-reliant, I don't need the government, I don't need other people looking out for me, that's an American virtue. And one beautiful thing about the ability to farm the sun or create your own energy is that's economic liberty, and it's enhancing self-reliance and individual determination. And so I love it when we can use our laws to further 2 of the greatest American virtues there are.
Absolutely, and I love that. I love that you just said that, because that's something that's very dear to my heart. The idea that it's really at the end of the day about the American dream, self-reliance, and the ability to have economic liberty. Now, what's the status of the bill?
Well, the bill was reported by unanimous vote out of the House of Delegates, Commerce and Labor Committee. It went to the floor. It's interesting, Martha, there were only 2 no votes against the bill, and they came from 2 delegates who were had heard that the Sierra Club, which is a group that normally strongly supports solar, was in gentle opposition to the bill because they thought it didn't go far enough. The bill that I filed, Martha, was a product of a year-long mediation group between electrical utilities and farmers.
Nice.
And when I got the bill, Martha, they said, Delegate Minchew, we know you're a lawyer. You know how to edit. We would respectfully ask you just to file this bill this carefully crafted piece of negotiation and not change it. So I did, but the Sierra Club wanted a little bit more, and some delegates who are wanted to follow and put high stock on the Sierra Club's recommendation voted no. But both came up to me afterwards and say, you know what, there's an old saying in politics that you should not let the perfect be the enemy of the good.
Yes, absolutely.
And that's very apt. So they were friendly no votes, Martha.
Yes.
They want to expand solar, but they respected the Sierra Club's position that my bill didn't go far enough.
Delegate Minchew, thank you so much. May I refer our listeners across Virginia to your website?
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. We hope to have you back very soon. Welcome back. This is Martha Boneta on Cut to the Chase. As many of you know, Virginia is very dear to me. It's the birthplace of America, and I care very deeply about the future of our Commonwealth. And we have a fantastic show for you today. We just heard from Randy Minchew. And if you want to get in touch with Randy Minchew about the drone legislation or about the energy bill, the renewable energy bill that Randy Minchew has in the General Assembly now, please reach out to him at delegaterandyminchew.com. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor and privilege to introduce you to Charles Green. He is the Deputy Commissioner with the Virginia Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services, which, by the way, I just found out today is one of the oldest agencies in the Commonwealth of Virginia. It was established in 1877. And the department, VDAX, is located within the Governor's Secretariat for Agriculture and Forestry and has both economic development and regulatory responsibilities under state law. What most people don't realize, or they should, is that agriculture is Virginia's #1 industry. It produces over 400,000 jobs and also over $60 billion into our economy. The folks at VDAX care very much about supporting our agricultural industry and work with farmers all across the Commonwealth. Thank you so much for joining us. Charles, I know how busy you are. To take time to come to the studio, we really appreciate it. Thank you.
No, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
Well, you know, one of the bills I wanted to talk to you about, in fact, the one in particular, is Senate Bill 1195 from Rich Stewart. It's received tremendous attention all across the Commonwealth from small, medium, large farmers, but also from the consumers. And when the bill was originally launched, it was not in the same state that it's in now. It's had several amendments, and I know you're going to speak to that. There was so much concern, and I really appreciate how VDAX wants to be transparent and provide answers. And I know that VDAX is in the process of creating a website where folks can go to and have some of their answers provided to them there. But can you speak to a little bit about, what exactly is the bill? I know that it authorizes the Commissioner of Agriculture and Consumer Services to conduct food safety related inspections on farms that are subject to the federal produce safety rule. Which the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, the FDA promulgated pursuant to the Federal Food Safety Modernization Act. Now that was a mouthful. Can you help put it into very simple lay terms? Because a lot of folks are really concerned, and I was hoping that you could put it into the simplest terms possible for us all. And then I have a whole list of questions for you.
Sure, glad to do so. So, Senate Bill 1195 is directly tied to the Food Safety Modernization Act and the Produce Safety Rule, which were regulations promulgated by the Food and Drug Administration pursuant to the federal law. Those federal regulations went into effect in January of 2016. And what they call for is really preventive measures that apply to produce that's or covered produce on covered farms that is going into the food chain. And the federal regulation says that either the FDA or an equivalent state regulatory body, State Department of Agriculture or State Department of Health, will carry out provisions related to that rule. And so in looking at and speaking with various farmers across Virginia and farm organizations, we polled them and asked, would they rather us look at seeking the authority to carry out the provisions of this rule, or would they rather leave that solely up to the discretion of the Food and Drug Administration? And what we heard overwhelmingly from those producers was that they would like for the Department of Agriculture to seek the authority to conduct the activities under the produce safety rule. And so that's why we asked for the introduction of this bill, Senate Bill 1195.
And, there's a lot of concern because in the Commonwealth of Virginia, we love our farmers, we support them, we lift them up. And a lot of folks have expressed a lot of concern about the idea of a government agency coming on their property. And I know that so many folks all across the Commonwealth want to feel secure and safe and not have fear. And I know that that VDAX wants to make sure that folks the fears are put to rest. And so, can you tell us a little bit about how many producers will be impacted by this bill?
Sure. So the best estimates on the number of producers that would be impacted by the bill come actually from the United States Department of Agriculture, the National Ag Statistics Survey. And that service estimates that there are about 2,300 commercial produce operations in Virginia, but of those, only about 400 are actually large enough to qualify to fall under this rule. So we estimate that it's somewhere in the neighborhood of up to 400 producers that actually have enough sales volume, sell through wholesale channels that would qualify to be subject to the rule.
And as far as, what if, as we've prepared for this show, I've had many people contact me, text me, and ask particular questions with regard to this bill because there is a lot of anxiety. And one of them I received from a small family farm that sells at a farmer's market. And they said, look, we're small producers. We have our one farmer's market a week. We bring our produce. We set up our stand. Am I going to be subject to this too?
Right. Well, I wanted to take a step back before I answer that question and kind of talk about one of the reasons we wanted the state to look at doing this rather than leaving it up to FDA. And that is really how we approach farming and small agribusiness in Virginia. And that is, our theory and approach to regulatory activities is education before regulation. And that's key because we don't want to be punitive. We recognize that agriculture and food businesses form the backbone of Virginia's economy. And our job is to help support those businesses. And so we always seek to ensure voluntary compliance, with whatever federal laws and regulations are out there or laws that are passed by the General Assembly related to food safety. So that's kind of the background of why we wanted to seek this authority. I will say that there is a very good decision tree that the FDA has put out as to who is subject to the rule and who is not subject to the rule. So it is a great tool. There are numerous exemptions under the rule. Sort of the first of those is if your farm has an average of less than $25,000 in annual produce sales, you're completely exempt from the regulation.
Well, and if I could ask one question, because
Sure.
I did get a question about that. Why 25,000?
That is a number that was, FDA put out there. I think it was, obviously they propose regulations and put those out for public comment. They received comments on that, and that's the number that FDA came up with. But beyond that, there are various other exemptions. So, the next question really is the produce that you're growing on your farm a commodity that FDA has identified as rarely consumed raw? And so if it's not something that's rarely consumed raw, then it's not covered by the rule, and there's an exhaustive list that FDA has. The next thing is the produce going for further processing that has a kill step in it? So there's an exemption. And
We're going to be back in just a few moments with Charles Green, Deputy Commissioner with the Virginia Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services. Thank you, everyone.
fight.
Welcome back, Virginia, home sweet home. We are so blessed and fortunate today to be able to address some important pieces of legislation in the Virginia General Assembly that have received a lot of attention. Right now, we're talking about State Bill 1195. We are here today with the Deputy Commissioner of VDACS, the Virginia Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services, that's been around since 1877, with Charles Green. And before we went on break, we were talking about exemptions, and we're going to finish that out. And then I have a list of questions that friends from all over Virginia have expressed concern about, and we're gonna address those too.
Sure. So I will finish out, and we're kind of getting to the last exemption there. The last exemption is a qualified exemption. So if your farm has less than $500,000 in annual food sales, and a majority of those sales are sold directly to qualified end users, which are restaurants or retail establishments that are located either in your same state or within 275 miles, then you can qualify as qualified exempt under the regulation also too. So you got to be a pretty large sized produce operation.
Like Purdue or
you,
Smithfield Hams.
You need to have over that $500,000 in sales and not be selling to the qualified end users to fall outside of that exemption.
Gotcha. Well, I haven't met a legislator in the Virginia General Assembly that likes this bill. I really haven't. In fact, most of them, when they hear SB 1195, their stomach turns. It just makes them uncomfortable because it doesn't matter what side of the aisle you're on, left, right, conservative, liberal. It just doesn't sit right with a lot of legislators. And in fact, I don't think VDACS likes this bill because it makes people upset and angry, and it makes them concerned, and people are afraid because they feel like, they don't know what to expect. And the bill has gone through several sets of amendments. And some of the legislators that did not support it originally are more comfortable with the new amendments. And one of the amendments that was put in was a sunset clause. And
That's correct.
Right. And then a lot of folks are very hopeful with the new administration that, a lot of these regs will be gutted and they won't exist. And I know that was a big issue and that it was addressed as well. Can you speak to the amendments and explain, why, if there are going to be no inspections for the next, 24 months, 2 years, one of the questions that was posed was, then why do we need this bill?
Sure. Well, I will kind of say that I think the members of the General Assembly and ourselves and producers are probably more uncomfortable with the federal regulations and the federal law, and that this state bill is really a reaction to that. And we're looking at it as a partnership with industry, with our universities, with other stakeholders that are out there, because we've got to all deal with the federal regulation. And we thought that this bill was the best way to help form that partnership so that we're able to get in there and actually take the place of federal regulatory enforcement and work with our producers to meet the requirements of the bill. You asked about the different sunset provisions and safeguards in the bill. Yes, there are a number of those. So there is, talk, well, if federal funding is not available, what happens? If the federal regulation gets repealed, what happens? So some of the amendments to the bill, an amendment to the bill states that if the federal regulation is repealed, immediately the authority at the state level would go away because we would have no reason to have that. Additionally, if federal funding to the state disappears to carry out provisions of the produce safety rule, then the bill, the authority would disappear as well. And lastly, there is a date sunset period of 2020, so 5 years, where the bill would sunset if it's not reapproved by the General Assembly. So I think that gives an opportunity for us and for farmers and others to communicate during that time period and say, yes, we still continue to like the state doing the inspections and carrying out the provisions rather than FDA, or no, at some point in time, we would like to turn it over to FDA and have them do this work. And at that point in time, we could let the bill sunset.
Yeah, one of the things that you said that really spoke to me, when you mentioned about the feds coming onto the farms, I think that the thought when you just say those words, a lot of our listeners, it causes them great anguish, as you can imagine. And so, I can understand that we share that concern. What can farmers expect in terms of, one of the questions we have, and we're going to address this after we come back from our commercial break, is, one of the farmers that contacted me said that he was worried, for example, what if when these inspectors are coming on the farm, they break a fence, or they somehow, affect or damage something on the farm. We're going to talk about that when we get back, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much. This is Cut to the Chase. Welcome back to Cut to the Chase, where we discuss legislation that's important to Virginians in every corner of the Commonwealth. We are here discussing Senate Bill 1195, introduced by Senator Richard Stewart. And we have with us the Deputy Commissioner of the Virginia Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services, Charles Green. And we were just getting into the weeds about, pardon the pun, because it is an agricultural bill, getting into the weeds. So we were just talking about how do you address liability? Because a lot of the farmers have said, look, we don't like this. Nobody likes this. Some farms do have to be inspected anyway. Inspector comes to the farm. What if they damage something? Our fence gets broken, or something happens. It could happen. I mean, things happen all the time during inspections. How is that handled? How is the farmer made whole?
Well, I would say one thing is we are extremely sensitive to private property rights. We inspect food businesses right now, about 13,000 different food establishments in Virginia that are inspected. And we are extremely, sensitive to how our employees interact with the clientele that they deal with. And in fact, I know the listeners can't see it, but I brought copies of our dairy inspector policy and procedures manual, and then our field operations manual for food safety inspectors. And both of these documents, they're about 300 pages long a piece. They cover everything from employee dress to etiquette to how they need to interact with the clients to steps for conducting, their just day-to-day operations. And they really lay the groundwork so that all the employees are working in a uniform manner. They're respectful of the clientele that we work with and the citizens of Virginia. And the same is true for this produce safety rule. When an authority is granted to us, if the bill passes and is signed into law, we would develop a similar manual and put it up on public town hall so that everyone can see, what are the protocols, the guidelines, how are employees expected to conduct themselves. I'll also say, our hiring process and training process for new employees is extremely thorough. They undergo both classroom training and on-the-job training, and address these issues during a period of training that can take over a year for them.
That's fantastic to know, because I know that that's been a huge bit of concern with not just producers, but Virginians in general. This idea of how is this going to be handled, and one point in particular that was fixed in the amendments was line 42 regarding civil penalty, and that for me caused me a lot of sleepless nights because of the way it was written, and let me say thank you for amending that from the criminal penalty in the original version of the bill. So that's been changed. A question came up in terms of, determining the amount of the penalty. It's described as the demonstrated good faith of the person charged in attempting to achieve compliance with this chapter after being notified of the violation. So how is this going to be equitably assessed? And what happens? Let's say you go to an apple farm and you pick up an apple and you take it to a lab, and the lab comes back and says that it's a bad apple, because there are bad apples. And the farmer is the farmer going to be shut down? What exactly happens then?
Right. So we do have in certain regulatory areas of the agency civil penalties for various violations. They are rarely used. And one example I have is, for example, we inspect all the animal pounds in shelters in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And there are civil penalties that are possible for critical violations. These are, egregious violations of animal care and welfare standards and laws. And I think last year, the total of fines collected under that was, $6,000 from all of those activities. So the civil penalties are not, they're not a method for generating income or anything like that. They really are used only for the most egregious violations in where other compliance steps and voluntary compliance, just hasn't worked to help people meet the requirements of a particular regulation.
So, in other words, once the inspection takes place, how long does the farmer have to cure the problem?
Sure. So, one of the benefits of having a state law regarding the federal regulation is it gives Virginia producers who are state inspected access to the Virginia Administrative Process Act. So that is a much more friendly due process for Virginia citizens than going through federal channels of enforcement of a regulation. And we're able to, expedite things very quickly. And in fact, when you look at another program, our food safety inspection program, they're kind of really escalating levels or 3 levels of violation. A lot of the violations that we find are really minor violations that don't require a written notice. They don't require anything other than the inspector noting, hey, there's a deficiency, and we would like to see you correct this. And the next time an inspection takes place, sometimes in the next 6 to 36 months, we hope that that issue is corrected. The next level up is something that is a little bit more of a critical violation and would require a written notice saying, we would like to follow up in the next 1 to 3 months. And when a follow-up inspection takes place, we need to see this item corrected because it's of a little bit more serious nature. It really takes a lot to get something of a violation that has a immediate impact on potential human health and safety where action immediately needs to take place.
And as far as, these inspections, in terms of this appeal process, would a farmer be able to say, I don't buy it. I don't think there's anything wrong with my apple. I think it fell off the tree and there's nothing wrong with it. What does the farmer do at that time? Like, how does what does the farmer do so that their business isn't shut down for apple season?
Yeah, that's correct. So, immediately, if someone were to find a deficiency of that nature during an inspection, the farmer can request a field hearing basically immediately following that to say, I dispute the findings that, the inspector alleges here. And so, that process can be expedited quickly.
Ladies and gentlemen, we will be back on Cut to the Chase. We are discussing SB 1195. Thank you so much. We will be back in just a few moments. Welcome back to Cut to the Chase. Virginia, the birthplace of our nation. It's also the home of our thriving agricultural industry. It's our number one industry, producing hundreds of thousands of jobs. And we have with us Charles Green, Deputy Commissioner with the Virginia Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services. Charles, thank you so much. There is so much to go over. We couldn't hit everything in this show. I'm hoping you'll come back to us. But how can people get the answers to their questions? And what's the best way for them to contact you? And I'm hoping you'll come back. I know we have an apple farmer on hold that wanted to speak to the bill as well. But I'd like to know how people can contact you and how they can have their questions answered on this bill. Sure.
So I did want to stress again that we view this as a partnership again with industry, with the producers. This is not something that we are trying to force upon people who don't want it. We've talked to the growers that are subject to the rule, and they are looking for the state to step in here and assist them in dealing with this federal regulation. I will also say, there are several questions that we didn't get to, and you shared some of those with me. We are almost finished with a question and answer document that will cover some of those questions, and I will would love to share that with you, and you can get it out to the folks who have contacted you. In addition, we are open and transparent. So, my telephone number is 804-786-3501. That's the commissioner's office line in the Department of Agriculture. People can call me anytime that they would like, and I will be glad to answer questions directly, try to alleviate any concerns, and, make them, help them to understand the rationale behind this and really the benefits to those producers who are going to be covered or are covered by the federal regulation. So that's that's what I wanted to impart to you.
Fantastic. And, I think that as we go through this process, I know there have been several amendments. I know there are still concerns out there. I'd love to have you back on the show. And I want to thank you for the transparency and the opportunity to, discuss all of these issues with you. With that said, I want to let everybody know that we here at Cut to the Chase care very much about Virginia. I personally like to end the show by saying that man is not truly free unless government is limited.